All right, 6:30 having arrived, I'll call the regular meeting of the Columbus Plan Commission to order for Thursday, February 16th. Roll call, we have all commissioners present with the exception of Commissioner Robbins. And this meeting was noticed in accordance with Wisconsin state statutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on approving the agenda? And there is none. So all in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. We have minutes from January.
No.
Yes, we do. If there's any requests, we have minutes from December. So I would entertain a motion to approve the December minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. 7A, there was a error which I believe was corrected appropriately, but it's considered certified survey map submitted by Olena Investments LLC of parcels 1185B and 1186.2 to subdivide the existing two parcels into three separate parcels. And so there's a lot of stuff going on here. I guess I could provide background, or maybe Scott Hewitt could as well. Either way, basically, Olena Investments purchased a platted but undeveloped subdivision on the western part of the city, and the city council passed a resolution basically allowing use of that where the streets would be for farming purposes because it's not developed and improved yet, and there's some issues then with what the legal description should be, and this is meant to clean up the legal description basically so that the tax lister will appropriately list the parcels. So maybe Scott could explain it more eloquently than I did.
Hewitt. Yeah, and so what we have in front of you, I think, is a 3-lot certified survey map. And as a follow-up, right now there's currently 94 acres out of the 100.4 acre plat that was originally created back in 2008. And a small portion of the plat was developed, and that shows up on shows up best on sheet number 3, where you can see we've located the pavement, existing improvements on Sturgis Street and Nina Drive. There's 2 Nina Drives, there's east and west, and a part of Siesta Court. I think there was a total of 15 lots that were developed, and I think maybe of those, I think we got 3 or 4 houses. So the certified survey map captures everything else outside of that development. And we've divided it up into 3 large outlots. So outlot number 1 contains just over 11 acres, and it abuts the existing residential developed area on the south side. Outlot 2 sits just off to the west of it. It's about 18 acres, and it has frontage on Maple Avenue. And then outlot 3 is everything else. And I think a question came up as far as, how did we come up with this layout of the outlots? And there was really nothing magical about it. The common line between outlots 2 and 3, there's an existing stormwater drainage area there. It acts as a natural boundary. In terms of development, we thought that would be a good dividing line. So that's how we established that point. As far as outlot number 1 goes, if you look at sheet 3 of 10, there's a concept map there. We can do a little bit better job of clarifying that, but it shows some dashed lines in there, what could be lots in the future if a developer was to go that route. But it's essentially allows for maybe 18 to 20 22 lots in there. If those streets were extended, the gray hatched area are the easements that are going to be retained, which would be the street extensions. So Brevity Lane extension, Nina, there'd be some connectivity there. There are existing stormwater easements there. And obviously, Jason did a real thorough job in reviewing the certified survey map. He revealed many concerns that he had, and we're working with Jason on that. We're not quite there yet. I'd say we're about maybe 50%. We got some more field work to do. We've got to locate, some of the stormwater facilities so that we can create easements to follow over them better. But again, we're working on it.
Right. Any questions right away for Scott?
This is for either Scott or Jason. You mentioned the discrepancy between what's on the roll is there's 2 tax parcels out there now, but a platted subdivision.
Yeah, it is a little convoluted in the sense that there was a deed from Herman Kraus, Hickory Investments, to Olena back in 2014. And there was a large meets and bounds description that was prepared and recorded at the Register of Deeds office. When it trickled down to the Land Information Department, where they do the parcel mapping, assign the tax parcels accordingly, they looked at the deed and said, well, we can't process this. We have to go through the vacation process. We got to get rid of the streets. We got to get rid of the public dedicated areas. So it's kind of been in limbo. Matter of fact, if you go online, it still shows.
It's one giant parcel.
One giant parcel still shows, I think, Hickory Investments is the underlying landowner, even though there was this transfer. So it needs to be fixed. And this is, obviously we're on the path of doing that here with the certified survey map. I think the county's going to be very glad to see this coming forward.
Any other questions? I think Jason wanted to probably say something, maybe not.
Regarding the comment letter that I prepared, this is a compilation of comments from staff, and I came tonight just because, not often, but it seems like a couple times in the last year we've had what I would call a very complex CSM, so there's a lot going on here. So kind of to go back and just kind of go through my letter and hit a couple highlights. The first few comments are pretty standard stuff, just kind of noting some things to be added or changed. Number 6 is the comment about the vacation of the outlots and streets dedicated to the public. And so there's been some discussion, and we were actually, Scott and I, just discussing it before the meeting here, a little bit about what the right process is to do that. I think we've kind of briefed the council a little bit, for those of you who were there a couple weeks ago at the COW, just a little bit about, I think Attorney Johnson was talking about the vacation process. But I do think that there's a couple things that we could, and Scott was mentioning a court order to vacate part of the plat. Now, we obviously have to retain the part that's there and built on. So I think we're still working with them to figure out what the best approach or method is to go through to get this accomplished. So although the comment is there, I think the end result of getting the work completed is what we're seeking. How we go about it, I think we're still kind of searching for that right answer that works for both parties. I will just note, and I have some numbers here, and it doesn't show up in the letter, but there's about just over 14 acres of right-of-way that currently exist under the current plat out there now that would be vacated. And there's about 16 acres, just over 16 acres of outlots. And those outlots were dedicated for various reasons, primarily for stormwater and parkland as part of the original plat for community trails. And there is also an alleyway included in those outlots as well. So those would be lands that we're looking to vacate and that we're working on under number 6. We had talked about a renaming of Nina Drive, just simply because according to the outlot, we'll have 2 Nina Drives. They were intended originally to connect in a U or a loop. And now that this will kind of terminate that potential possibility, so we may have to, or I'm recommending we bring that forward for EMS and other issues to make sure that we clarify that. And then we get into just a whole long list of easements, and I think the intent here, just to understand, is there's a lot of easements that were intended to be used as part of the planned unit development. Specifically, if there was something going on a parcel, there had to be an easement to serve it properly. Since that's not occurring, a lot of these disappear. Now the question is, well, why don't we just get rid of all the easements? But there are some easements that we need to retain. So that was the intent of looking at number 14 with all of the comments about these were okay, that we felt we didn't need those easements in the future. So that's A through M. So we'd be looking at getting or releasing those rights that were dedicated. And those primarily are sewer easements, storm easements, sanitary easements. There's a couple of utility easements here, some right-of-way easements and some things like that. And then there's a couple other miscellaneous comments on here. And then probably the biggest thing that I wanted to come here tonight just to kind of bring to your attention and maybe throw out there for topic of discussion is when this plat was originally platted, there was, I believe, and I don't know, I don't have the exact numbers, but I recall in the development agreement there was an agreement to dedicate some of this outlot land as parkland per the ordinance, and obviously that's a requirement that you have. I believe also as part of community trails, I believe there was a fee in lieu of that might have also been paid for a portion. So I think there was a combination of dedication and fee paid. My concern here is that by releasing all of this public land that exists, that we've really kind of reverted back to the whole point of having this land in the city and having it develop was that, you know, and having the parkland dedicated is now it's being taken away when there could be a potential. Now, I guess the recommendation is, for me, is to be aware of that. If this commission recommends and the council ultimately decides, you know, they're okay with releasing that because they don't see the future development occurring in the near future, and when that comes around again, it can, you know, as it develops, it can be rededicated at that point. Or if you want to retain something now, or require that because, you know, this is a CSM or a replat, if you will, of this property, and so that kind of kicks in this parkland dedication component. So I think there's a couple different ways you can view that, but I wanted to at least throw that out there and at least have you guys think about it, have a discussion, and be aware of some options regarding what's historically been done. Parkland was dedicated, and then obviously they're looking to vacate that dedication now and give it back to the potential property owner. So again, that was maybe more so of a fairly poor recommendation, but maybe a topic that I wanted to bring up for you guys to talk about tonight and decide if you want to pursue that or retain some land or renegotiate an area of land for a park or a fee dedication in lieu of or something. So if that makes sense. I don't think I did a very good job explaining it, but
How much parkland are we talking?
I believe the ordinance says up to 15 acres, or 15% of the development. Now, again, the ordinance says up to, so it's not, you know, it's kind of capped at, so it doesn't necessarily dictate what that could be. I think Scott said it's just shy of 100 acres, so it could be up to 15 acres. Now, that obviously, I think when I was on Plan Commission and back in the day, we had talked about having some type of a west side park, you know, some area in that neighborhood, because there is a lot of residential development, maybe not right on this parcel, but adjacent to it. And the outlot, if you go back to the CSM, the one that I recall was this outlot 4, which is located kind of behind the west side lift station, so it would have access through the city property onto Warner Street. And outlot 4 was about 4.6 acres that was dedicated. There was some wetlands on there. There was some native area as well. I mean, it certainly could, at a 5-acre park, certainly could have had usable space in addition to this nature area. And that was really, I think, the primary piece that was dedicated at that time or intended to be turned into a park. So if you go back and look at the PUD for community trails, it does show a park there as part of the planning process.
Number 16 on your list, Jason, could you clarify that, please?
Okay, the floodplain here is, and Uriah might be able to correct me. So the floodplain here was modeled with the development previously with the intent that a CLOMAR is a conditional letter of map revision to the FEMA mapping process. And when this was modeled, there's obviously a floodplain out there because this is adjacent to the waterway and fairly low in elevation. As part of the approval process to do all the development that was planned, a conditional letter of map revision was filed, and it had gone in for approval, and FEMA had approved it. That basically says that you intend to fill this area, and you've provided the necessary documentation and outlets to prove that you're not impacting the floodplain onto other people and other things like that. What happens is obviously once the development occurs, the CLOMAR then has to be certified to verify that it was done correctly, and then it has to be adopted into and the mapping revised or updated. In this case, the conditional letter of map revision still exists, but because this area hasn't been filled, technically the floodplain still exists as it did prior to the conditional letter of map revision. There was some changes that were done in this area that was developed that we were talking about, these 14 lots. And I believe those all had been certified, all the elevations had been certified in there, and so there were adjustments made to the floodplain as it relates to those particular lots. But everything else still remains the original land, and no filling has been done. The only area that's really been modified in any of this would be the stormwater pond that's adjacent to the waterway that we're looking to retain an easement for that's hatched, and that shows up on, I think, sheet 2, and I don't know whether sheet that shows up on. So what I was getting at here was I think this certified survey map as presented showed the conditional floodplain or the proposed new floodplain line. But that's not how it exists today. How it exists today would still revert back, in my mind, to what the natural land contains. So,
Because of all the changes that were made to the new maps that are out now, and pop in if you so wish,
I'll wait till you're done talking.
how would that impact this development going forward with what the new maps are? Because a lot of other spots in the city have drastically changed.
I brought new map, copies of the new map along. Essentially, the CLOMAR that was filed back when was based on a different set of modeling and mapping, okay? Often on letters of map revision, conditional letters of map revision, et cetera, there are sort of some conditions listed there. And one of the conditions that's frequently, in fact, I can't think of a case where I haven't seen it listed, is that, any map change is gonna supersede this determination. Okay, so I believe, and we can always go back and look at the CLOMAR approval from FEMA, but I believe that that's pretty much null and void now because a new map has been published. So you could file for a new CLOMAR with similar proposed conditions, et cetera, but you would need to use this current map as a basis for doing so. So,
right. And I believe from my indication that the new landowner isn't interested in developing it himself or at this time. So until that, I think we show the floodplain as it exists on the new mapping as it currently is today, until at such time they would want to come back and potentially, like I think Uriah said, petition for a new Clomar and determine how they were gonna fill the property. If there was some, whether it's residential development or commercial development or some other type of development that would occur there, regardless, that plan would be different than the original Clomar was based off of, that we're kind of vacating and kicking out the door right now. So I think we just have to get true up with that floodplain, is I guess what I was getting at in that, to be simplistic about it.
Anything else?
Just quickly before you move on, I just want to address what Jason was saying about the parkland. I just learned not too long ago about just a citizen had come forward with concerns about potential loss of that parkland that was dedicated as part of the current plat. So I just want to make you aware, I don't know, as this goes, something to share. I don't have any more specifics about that, but I just know it was an issue among someone in the community, so.
Would, I guess in what we're discussing, would we be discussing, we're just discussing the potential, a certain number of acres that we would want to have dedicated as a park? We're not specifying where or what, I mean, just,
Well, if it's gonna be anywhere, I would suggest that it would be immediately adjacent to the city-owned land where there's access off of Warner Street where the Warner Street lift station is. And I don't think that it would be appropriate to ask for any more land than what was already dedicated. Because this isn't a new development. It's really just canceling out the previous development. And I don't know what the development agreement said relative to when that parkland was going to be developed. Because I remember when JAC started building, they had to pay, I believe, $1,000 fee or something to the city per building permit as to get that first phase going. So I don't have the development agreement and all of that information relative to when that was actually going to come on as a park. So I think the first phase probably was to keep costs lower when Kraus Herman was developing. I think they probably agreed to the $1,000 or whatever it was per building permit in lieu of the park, so to speak, but that the plan eventually was to have that there. And the rest of it hasn't developed. So I think that if the city council or the plan commission wanted to make a recommendation, that it would be no more than what's existing. But my suspicion, based on my limited knowledge of commercial real estate development, is that was probably going to come in at such time as the rest of it developed, and they would have to put some playground equipment on there or whatever was going to be in the plan. And I don't know how valuable that is. Mr. Hansen is not a developer. He's not planning to develop it. I think that probably that 11, 12 acre outlot probably could be developed fairly easily near the stuff that JAC did. The rest would be more complicated probably to develop.
so just to clarify on that, then, there's no, when you say 4.6 acres would be dedicated, we can, what point does it have to be actually built or dedicated? There's no timeline on that, or?
I can't answer that question without having the development agreement in front of me. This whole thing was set up wrong in the front end, probably by planning the entire thing at once. I mean, but Herman wanted it all planned out, and how the whole thing was going to look. I mean, it's down to what building plan is basically on each lot in the PUD. It's very, very well thought out that way. So they did plat it out all at once, which is not probably typical with development. Like Kestrel Ridge was platted in various phases, whereas this was platted in one big plat. So I can't answer when it would have to be developed. I mean, the city would own that now, so to speak. The city would have the fee to that, but it's not developed. So I can't answer that question. Yeah.
If you take out the provision for the park, part of this that was originally in there, how hard is that to get that back in with a new developer agreement?
That would probably have to be, that would be negotiated between the developer and the city at such a time that a new plat was proposed.
But the ordinance would say that they would have to have up to.
Right. And the issue with the right-of-ways where the streets would be, I have zero concern with that. Obviously, it's not developed. If you vacate a street, by law, it goes to either side. So Elena owns either side. The parkland is of some concern if this area ever did develop. I think one thing to keep in mind is if a developer were gonna come in and start putting up houses, having a park is gonna be a key selling point of that development. I don't think the city council would allow a massive development without park. When Kestrel Ridge was developed, Avalon Park went in and basically land that was useless because it would flood. And I don't know if that's a city council issue or a plan commission issue as to, I mean, a judge has to sign off on the vacation of the plat. But
I'd like to see the park requirements stay in there. I think it should.
Yeah, and what's the usual percentage dedication requirement for a plat?
we have not had a plat since I've been the mayor, so I can't
Nor have
answer
I.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. But am I understanding right that there was some reduction in the percentage of land required because there was also a fee paid in lieu?
That's usually what that means.
Okay. Okay. All right. Because it's sort of an accounting problem, right? The city's already accepted money in lieu of a different standard than normal, and the standard has been set in this case at 15% precisely, or roughly 15. What was dedicated on here is fine. Okay. I'm going to suggest this that for maybe more for administrative sort of working through this, but the city's already got money set aside that was received from the original developer. We can figure out how much percent of the entire plat, the outlots that were dedicated for park purposes goes. Can it be as simple as any CSM that's approved has a deed restriction placed on it that states, upon further subdividing of this or upon application of a plat, such and such a percentage of land needs to be dedicated as parkland? Because a developer's agreement at this point in time, is premature. There's nothing developing, so you can't have a developer's agreement get set in place. But I've, on occasion, have had deed restrictions, put on the things that I've worked on, so that there's some future consideration in perpetuity. Of course, that trusts that the that the title process works, which I think clearly in the original case of land transfer didn't here, but we can only hope for better things. So I guess that would be one suggestion. Honestly, maybe that needs to get passed by corporate council as an idea first, but that's the only thing that immediately comes to mind to be able to preserve that. I think it's maybe premature to say exactly which piece ought to do it. yeah, it makes sense to have it adjacent to the existing city park on Warner Street. But to tell you the truth, looking at the floodplain map, what would happen there is that developable land would get attached as parkland, and then some remainder that's less easy to develop is what gets left as developable. So I think some master concept planning needs to take place to make sure that that all happens in the right way. So that's a good segue into my other comment about this, if nobody else wants to comment more about the park dedication.
No, I guess my only concern would be to not have to create a narrow box where somebody would have to fit into when it wouldn't make sense anymore. If they had to, I'm all in agreement with the park and the need for that in that area. It's just I don't necessarily want to confine anybody to a previous plan. That doesn't make sense anymore.
Right, and I don't think the previous plan makes sense anymore. It kind of seems like from what very rudimentary sort of pre-planning for some additional development, it seems like, according to the owner and any potential buyer, the old plan doesn't make sense anymore. So, I'm very much of the opinion that.
And then
It
I guess
should
if
just
any new plan would
get mopped
also
up.
require a certain amount of park area, then
Right. And usually, if that transfer of money hadn't occurred from the original, the original development, walk away from it, make a totally new deal, or, have dedication of parkland strictly based on whatever the city ordinance says. But I think sort of that fact has to be respected, even though the original developer isn't even in the picture anymore. So,
And we probably don't have, go ahead, sorry.
My only concern in this whole thing was this money that was paid already for this parkland in lieu of for this parkland. We don't have any financial obligation to the exact numbers on this, do we? Listed anywhere?
The city would have records of how much has been paid.
How much has been paid?
I don't have it in front of me, obviously.
But there was no projection as to what was going to be paid either.
I have no idea if there was a lump sum at the beginning
Or-
when the stuff went in. I know there was payments made by JAC to the city when they pulled building permits for that, but I don't know if there was a payment up front that was before my time, and nor do I know what the
See, we can kick the can down the road a little further, That happens any time as long as we don't have any financial responsibility. That's all I'm looking at. I'm for the parkland, and it can be on a new subdivision. It could be anywhere they want to put it.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo what Mayor said. Again, lacking the details. And I apologize, I didn't have time to pull that information on that previous developer agreement, but I believe there was a phased payment. I think there was a payment initially, which didn't happen with Herman because he didn't develop, but when JAC came in, that's the initial payment that was made, was the building permit fee. And then I believe at a certain percentage of development, then I think there was another piece, and I think that second piece, if I recall right, was intended to help fund the equipment. So the land was dedicated, so the parkland's there today. So you have that now. But the money that was supposed to come in as the fee in lieu of was to come in initially, and that was paid by JAC, I believe. And again, I don't know the amount, but then the second portion or the second fee, I think, came in a little later. So I think there was like a split timing on the payments. I think to give the developer time to sell some lots and get some money, and then he would fund some improvements in that park. So it was fairly complex on what was kind of arrived at for a solution. But I think ultimately the city was looking at, parkland with some furnishings at some point of the development as it grew. Well, I guess my only concern here is that, keep in mind, you already have this parkland. My concern is that if you vacate it or give it back, and again, this is just kind of a recommendation here, but then there's, other than the fee that you have incurred, or the money that you've collected, you don't have a piece of parcel out there. Now, if you have some deed restriction to say when that this land develops, that there needs to be parkland, that's fine, but that just reinforces the ordinance, which already requires that now. And that gets kicked down the road for a later body to kind of decide. It's hard to pick a piece of land out there now, and I agree with Uriah. My fear is that if you don't retain something in this deal as a physical property for this, if this land goes undeveloped for 30 or 40 or 50 more years, or who knows how long, you really don't ever have this land available for a park. You may have the promise as a note on the deed, and you have an ordinance that says when it develops, but if it never develops, then you don't retain that property anymore. So again, vacating it or releasing this land that you have now set aside, I don't agree with the shape or anything what's set aside now. It's an odd shape. I don't think it would work for the landowner to farm it and try and farm around these jagged edges and stuff, but it's just kind of the way the shape fits with the current lots. So that's why I guess I wanted to bring it up here and talk about this. If you choose to do that, that's perfectly fine, but just be aware that kind of once it's gone, it's a little hard to get back. I mean, you can't control saying, well, in 5 years, we'd like to have a park out there. Well, you really don't have any control over it at that point other than a promise. So that's just something to think about. But I think that's kind of the point that I wanted to bring up tonight was it was complex, and I think it really kind of puts a complex situation together for you guys now to consider even the timing. And again, I don't have the answer, but I'm thinking out loud here. Maybe it is an agreement with the landowner, at date certain that there'll be land determined to be set aside. If there's an agreement put in place where maybe it's in more than 5 years or something, where that issue can be worked out as what's the right piece of land, what should it be, how much should it be, is it equal to what's there now? Maybe the landowner would be willing to give more, maybe he'd be willing to pay more of a fee in lieu of. I think there's all kinds of options to work through here, but I would just be cautious about letting it go with not having anything to secure, because you do have it now. I mean, it is your land now, so.
How much land does the city own, do you know, on the station property?
Well, I'm just going to do a rough comparison here. It's equivalent to Outlot 6, which is just graphically it looks similar. You probably own 1.5 acres.
So we have about 5 to 6 acres total.
If you combine it with this Outlot 4, yeah, currently you
Okay.
have about 5 to 6 acres. I mean, which in my mind is more than reasonable. And again, there was a fee in lieu of if this was a new development dedicating, assuming there was nothing in the past, you'd be looking up to 15% of 94, 96. So this is substantially less than what it would be in that case, and kind of going back based on like the mayor said, the original agreement. Because I know there was a fee paid in lieu of. So I think that would be a nice piece of property for a park. That'd be in that size range. So it's not these
the
little
city does own it now. The city has the fee simple. It's undeveloped entirely now. The city could develop it no matter what happened, whether this developed or not, the plat. One suggestion is the city could continue to own it under the agreement that the city council previously has with Elena. The could continue to be farmed until such time as the city wanted to improve it. If a developer came in and wanted to redevelop that differently with a different plan for a park, at that point the city could then do a land swap essentially and get a better park or a different park or however it was going to work out. So I know that was done with Fuller Street. That was when this was originally platted. There was existing right of way for Fuller Street extension, which changed to accommodate the development. That's just simply one possible idea.
I guess that would kind of alleviate any concern I would have is just that if somebody were wanting to develop it, they would have some sort of recourse to come back and say, well, we'll keep the part, we just want to move it, and we could swap it or do something like that, and that wouldn't be anything that would prohibit somebody from wanting to develop it. It's not a big...
I would also point out the city does have open park space at the end of Meadow Lane, which has never been developed. And that's been a subdivision for about 20 years at least now. And the city also has land in Cardinal Estates for park purposes, which kind of butts up to the Meadow Lane, but there's a creek through there. So there are already arguably three undeveloped parks in the entire kind of neighborhood. Cardinal Estates, though, is a little bit closer to Fireman's Park. If you cross through the bike path by Strohschein and Green, and then get to Fireman's Park that way. But personally, I don't think the city is going to be looking at developing this anytime soon. The Parks and Rec Committee has been looking at new equipment for Meister Park and Washington Park to get safety compliant and ADA type compliance. So I think that's their initial priority, but there's no saying what could happen in the future with this park. I mean, a generous benefactor could come forward tomorrow and offer to improve it. So if anyone's interested.
It's not entirely undeveloped. My kids and
Okay.
I and my neighbor kids laid out a ball diamond in it last summer.
Okay, so
you got
the
that going for you.
Uriah Monday Honorary Park.
Put the plaque up tomorrow.
We'll take checks so that you can drop them off at the treasurer's
Oh wait,
office.
checks. Oh, never mind.
So I guess my suggestion would be, I guess the city owns it now, and if the city wanted to keep it, that's probably the preferred method, because I think the city council, when we passed the resolution on the land, I think that was more relating to the right of ways significantly than a park. Because right of way is obviously entirely different than, I mean, they can't realistically be farming around right of ways, and we can't realistically lease a 66-foot wide strip of land for farm purposes. And I don't know if this is even a plan commission issue or a city council issue.
Yeah, I was about to ask where. I guess maybe
Probably
it's time to
both.
refocus on.
I really don't know.
My overall view of having this CSM up for consideration tonight is that it's, at best, premature. Right? I mean, we can't even divide land where it's got street vacation issues and all that other stuff involved. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think the letter tried to summarize all what were foreseen issues that needed to be addressed, obviously prior to the final CSM being created and brought back, but there's still some unanswered questions of parks in my mind, primarily the street vacations, determining what the best method of that is.
Right, yeah, and I think all the things in your letter are, definitely things that need to be addressed, but I know often we come here and there's, a manageable list of things, and it's more of a checklist of, all right, do this to meet the ordinance, do this, clean it up, and then we often then say, yes, we approve this, contingent on getting everything taken care of. The way I see it, even if everything were taken care of in the letter, there's still floating items out there. Okay. I've got some personal reservations about dividing this into 3 lots. I'm not quite sure why it can't be 1. Right? I understand cleaning up some of the problem and consolidating the property, but I've got reservations about dividing things up in honestly what either looks like a haphazard way or some underlying concept plan that's there, but like for instance, Outlot 1 is almost entirely floodplain and wetland. Why would you divide it unless you were intending to perhaps sell it? And if you were intending to perhaps sell it, that's just an utterly, I don't want to say utterly worthless. to develop would pose some severe challenges. Let's say that. There, that's diplomatic, right? So, I guess I would say that this should come back once maybe development team. Is this a good job for development team to hash through? Uh-oh, Jason, you're laughing.
Hash through it.
Has it been hashed through at development team? What was their recommendation? Send it to plan commission?
I don't know that there was a recommendation. I
Can't-
think
can't
that
know.
I think
Okay.
the thought in putting the 3 outlots was that might be how they would be sold to developers. I don't know if there's floodplain issues with outlot 1. Assuming there were no floodplain issues with outlot 1, that makes sense. But
I
if
took the
it's,
liberty of overlaying the outlet, or the entire thing with the way the floodplain currently lies out. It's the crosshatch stuff on my pencil drawing. Yeah, it's based on this, which is the, revision from
Yeah,
last.
so on the development team side, Grothman, the surveyor came in, and also a representative from Molina, and kind of talked through this, and this has been ongoing. They've actually been in front of the development team a couple times over the last couple of years because of what the mayor had stated originally, that this is just, it was sold, but it was sold as one big parcel, in the county saying, well, you can't sell the right-of-ways, and you can't use this boundary description for the transaction. And so this thing's been in limbo. So they've been in and kind of talked to us a couple times about how to resolve this and the best approach. And I think we recommended at a certain point is you really have to kind of vacate the stuff and re-CSM this. So that was a year or two ago that occurred. And so there's been some work on their end, obviously, to develop, a fairly comprehensive, at least draft CSM, if you will. And then recently they were back in a month or so ago and met with the group. And the staff at the DT meeting, development team meeting, our primary concern was not vacating something that we needed, i.e. easements or stormwater ditches and ponds, but we can release the stuff we don't need, like sanitary and water easements out in the middle of space for a lot that's no longer going to exist. And so the concern with us was, and going back to what the mayor said, I mean, the right-of-ways, if they're vacated, revert back, and if there's no development can occur here, even if there was development, it's likely going to be different than the original plat because it was so large and it was platted. It's obviously not very realistic with the PUD anymore. We even had some conversations about the PUD in existence because that still exists even if we get rid of the underlying plat. The PUD overlay still exists. But I think the general direction from staff there was, and legal counsel was, leave it exist until somebody comes in, because then it either way it still has to be amended at some point. So just because that exists out there and the underlying land has changed doesn't mean that the PUD, I mean, it could be amended, but there's no point amending it, because what would you amend it to? You have no idea. And so the idea was that would stay. So we've talked about all of those various components. And so the idea here was to kind of clean this up. The parkland thing kind of came out of discussion afterwards when we started looking at, releasing and vacating all of this, and said, well, wait a minute, this outlot was dedicated for parkland and there was some underlying. And I apologize, we didn't have any more information on what the original agreement was, and we can get that. Certainly that exists. So yeah, the development team has really kind of kicked this through, and we thought, well, the best place to do would be kind of bring it forward and start talking about it on this level, because we know you guys would have some good input at your level, and then we know that the council likely is going to have to make some ultimate decision, but I'm sure they're going to be looking to staff and that it's been through this body as well for some feedback. So that's kind of where we're at today. Certainly I don't know if the timing is critical on this, Scott. Do you know?
It really isn't critical, no. There is no, potential buyer out there. I guess to answer a question, why we got the 3 outlots instead of just one large outlot is, it's very difficult to find a developer, obviously, to develop all of that property. And to divide it into smaller outlots, you open it up to a larger population of an individual that may want to, say, buy outlot number 1 or outlot number 2 for developing. But as Jason said, I think at that time, that's when you relook at a general development plan with that buyer, that developer. And you look at all of those things. You look at the wetland concerns, you look at the floodplain concerns. You look at what, how they want to, how many lots they want to build. Does there need to be some zoning changes at that time? Does the PUD not work for what they want to do? All of those things will have to be addressed, but not necessarily with Kurt right now. I mean, he's not looking at developing it. He can't foresee what a potential buyer would want. So to do all those things and come up with a plan that may not work just doesn't seem to make sense at this point.
Frankly, I think it's more salable to have one large piece, because then any potential buyer can sort of take the bite that they want.
And the option's there. They can buy all 3 outlots. I mean, if
But
there's...
why?
I think what Uriah is trying to say, it might be one less CSM to get part of it.
Yeah, but again, we don't know. This could sit on the market for 5-10 years. We just don't know. The housing market isn't healed yet, from the recession. Kurt doesn't want to develop this. He's not a developer. He wants to farm it.
I understand that. I mean, it's...
And he's looking to sell it. So we thought this concept here would be ideal. Or more ideal. Maybe it'd have to be tweaked. Maybe things will change a little bit when there's a prospective buyer. But, the 3 outlots seems to make sense at this point. Again, it just opens it up for more people to be able to look at developing it instead of one large piece of property.
What would be wrong with working on the theory of the one outlot at a time approach?
Going back to saying that it's all together?
No, you making the 3 outlets, but just having outlot 1 as a major project, and outlot 2 and outlot 3. You've got a lot of water land on these lots, and I just don't see somebody really jumping the gun to try to, unless there's something in progress already in somebody's train thought,
Well, as Uriah had mentioned, there is a concern there with the flood fringe. It is the newer maps show the floodway by Robbins Creek, which cannot be developed, cannot be filled.
Right.
Nothing can be done with it. But I guess what a developer would have in their corner is that there was this conditional letter map revision that was approved, albeit on an older version of the floodplain map. But was there much of a change, Uriah, to the base flood elevation
About half a foot.
about a half a foot? So nothing drastic.
Nothing drastic. I guess I'd caution anybody in saying that Clomer still holds any weight. In my
I
opinion,
understand.
the only thing it does is to give somebody guidance as to say, okay,
Yes.
this is how it was done last time. Feasibly, it can be done
Exactly.
similarly this time.
Yep, exactly. And so those steps can be taken again in the future when there is a developer on board. Those things all have to be, taken into account. A new wetland delineation. I think that was brought up as well.
The state comes along and delineates a wetland change, and then we got a problem again.
Well, it's already there. These are almost 10 years old. Anytime you'd file for a permit to do a land disturbance, they're gonna ask for one, so it's already, so, and I'm not gonna say that you need to go and delineate it, because like you said, maybe it's another 8 years
Five,
before any
yep.
of these parts get done.
Right, and then
But
you have to do it again anyway.
That's one of those things that, you're talking about nebulous potential future buyers, right? And that's all fine.
But these
I
are,
just, I think carving it up into certain areas, particularly when I'm seeing one area that you've carved up, you know, having both wetlands and floodplain on it, and knowing the challenges that that poses to development, if that's not appropriately shown and accounted for, what we end up with in here is a buyer who's purchased a piece of property that then wants to subdivide it, and staff and us have to tell them, oh geez, there's all these restrictions on it.
well, it is a large lot. It's 11 acres.
It's a large lot and it's largely full of wetland and floodplain.
There is. Yeah, and
Size of the lot does not matter.
I think even if the original developer was to move forward with the next phase, they'd still have to go through a lot of these processes all over again because of the time that's taken. So it's really no different in that regard. Even if they were looking at this as a phasing, and they say, okay, it's been a long time, but we're gonna go to the next phase, they would still have those same challenges.
Right,
that you're
and
talking about.
I'm urging you to, and I think you're trying to do this, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm urging you to leave the door as wide open for flexibility and development.
And
And
I
think
think,
the 3 lots leads actually to some inflexibility.
well, again, they're very large lots. We got 11-acre lot, 18-acre lot, and a 64-acre lot. So we're not trying to create these small restrictive areas. And I understand the concerns that are out there, but still, we've got a lot of real estate to work with here for these outlots that we created. It might not be the same build-out that was planned originally, be at a smaller scale potentially, but there's a lot of land here in this proposal.
Anything else? Then do we want to make a recommendation to the council? Do we want to handle the park issue separate from the other issues? It looks like Jason wants to say something. It's my opinion. Jason looks like he wants to say something.
Second that opinion.
I'm just not certain how we can divide something into any number of lots, 1, 2, or 3, frankly, without,
So you want to see the judge sign off on the vacation
I want to
first?
see how that all goes.
Either of you have anything to?
I think we're looking for, a favorable nod to move forward in that direction. And if there could be a condition of a recommendation that we get these streets, obviously we gotta go through all of this before, in the end, the map is approved, signed by the city and recorded. Similar to the Ibish certified survey map that we did. We still have to go through all of these steps. All the vacations have to take place. This is the first step, so to speak, and we then move on to the next and the next.
Would a motion to recommend to the common council to submit the paperwork to the court within the map coming back when the paperwork with the court is done?
That's vacating right-of-way and vacating park?
I don't think we're going to want to vacate the park myself.
I don't.
Okay, then it's gotta come back here, because now you've still got, 6 outlots floating around that were dedicated as park. I should say dedicated to the public, that's what it says on the plat, right?
I'm
There's
more
6 different
concerned
outlots.
with the outlot that was adjacent to the Warner Street lift station. I think that's the one that's viewed as a park by people in the community.
Sure.
I don't think where the stormwater pond or any of that type of easements or right of ways, I don't think that was at all what
Right.
anyone's. And
There's an
maybe you-
alley, and then there's 3 that are between Community Drive and the stream.
The Robbins Creek, and they were gonna be privately maintained It says it on the face of the
Yeah.
plat, so yeah, I think
But it said dedicated to the public and
Right.
privately maintained.
Right.
So it's public land that through some developer agreement,
they were
somebody else
gonna
is
maintain
paying for
it.
mowing.
Yes, yes.
You know, but
So is there any motion then to the council? See none, then I guess I'll make a motion to recommend to the city council to start the process of the vacation of the right-of-way portions of the plat without the park portion of the plat. And that any further mapping issues would come back to the plan commission prior to then going back to the council.
I'll second that.
Okay. So the motion then would be to recommend to the city council to move the vacation of the right-of-way easement type issues forward, retaining the park portion adjacent to Warner Street. So we're all clear on what that would.
And does that get us to the next
I
step?
think that gets the city council, I think then this is on the agenda for the next meeting at the committee of the whole level. And then it would be, the city council would have to file a motion or pass a motion or a resolution, instructing the city attorney to basically file that paperwork. There's a hearing then, with a judge, and then there's notices in the paper and all that stuff, but that would then come back here. Once the vacation of the right-of-ways were done, then the map would would come back.
Would that get us to the point where it could be all these, what, A through M issues of Jason's got there, that would pretty much clean all of that up then?
The vacation would clean up, and getting rid of the plat would, and all the easements would have to be released, because those would be separate from the plat, I think. But, I don't think that the city doesn't necessarily need, utility easements through that entire area, where they were gonna be. There's some easements that are gonna work out with water and light to make sure that they have the easements that the utilities need to provide the services. If it were developed, easements would then be part of the development agreement for where utilities would be, because you can't develop without utilities is basically the bottom line. And the city doesn't need those, there's no use for those easements. You're basically cleaning the slate entirely, undoing everything that was done, and a blank canvas for somebody else to come in. So if you're looking to become a developer, Bob, there's probably an opportunity for you on the west side of town.
It looks like I get fish ponds.
So, all right. So we have the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Jason?
So just so I understand, you're talking about vacating the right-of-ways I know you still want to retain the park and have a chance to come back to that. Are you talking then about vacating some of the other outlots, like that are part of the alleyways or the stormwater ponds, or do you want those to remain still as actual outlots and not vacate those yet?
Does the city need the stormwater pond?
The pond now serves the development that's there. The pond was built large enough to serve the entire development, but I don't think it's realistic that we're gonna go in and fill in part of the pond just because the development isn't gonna occur at this time. If developer comes in the future and wants to develop, depending upon the density and some other things, this pond retroactively could help support their stormwater requirements. So for now, I think that what we were proposing was having an easement around the pond with an accessibility, where there could be access into that pond, and then an easement connecting the channel that flows the water from the development now over to the pond. So I don't think we need the outlot per se, but I think we definitely need to retain that rights for the water to flow to and into the pond. And for us to get access to it, so. That could be done by easement in my mind.
As the maker of the motion, I'll offer an amendment to the original motion incorporating the proposed changes that Jason discussed. I need a second to the
Second.
amendment.
Second the amendment.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the original motion to, you getting all this, Patrick?
I think so,
We
yeah.
have an amendment to the original motion to incorporate the changes as discussed with Jason regarding the storm water pond.
Yep.
All right, so all in favor then of the amendment would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now the motion has been amended to read, to be that vacation of all the right-of-ways and unnecessary parts of the plat, easements, et cetera, retaining necessary easements, as Jason said, around the stormwater pond, and retaining the park outlot, which would be adjacent to the previously existing city land on Warner Street.
That's outlot 4.
So that's the motion. Any further discussion? And all in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that carries. And then that would also then cover, I guess, item B. C, Patrick, do you have anything to add?
Just quickly, out in TIF number 4, the Duffy Ventures development is nearing opening. They're going through their final things to be prepared for business. The Fromm development, they're working on their plans yet, a little bit of process to work with them. And we continue to work with Vita Plus on lands north of that area, kind of dealing with some access issues and other things we got to do yet, but probably some things coming back to the commission on that. Otherwise, we've had a couple other potential inquiries about lands in the TID, and we'll see if anything comes out of those discussions. But development seems to be moving along nicely still. Thank you.
Anything further? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you all.